Okay, now we're good. So can I like just have a thumbs up if you can hear me, or you can just say something in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself. Anybody?
Guys, no need to be shy. You can just click the react button and just give a thumbs up.
Okay. Maybe you can turn on your laptop to see whether.
Yep.
Okay. All right. I think you can hear me. Okay. So, all right. Thanks everyone for attending today's session. Apologies being late. Actually, it was quite difficult to find this LT because I'm not from NTU. So let me begin by introducing myself. I am Vincent, and I'm one of the co-founders of MetaCamp. And at MetaCamp, we aim to nurture the next 1,000 or even 100,000 talents in the Web3 and the blockchain space. So how do we do that? Our strategy is we organize workshops, we conduct bootcamps, and also we organize and co-host hackathons. Okay, so that's that. And for myself, I was an analytics student back in university, and then when I first came out of university, I was a data scientist, and I decided that data science wasn't really for me, so I switched over to software engineering, and thereafter I discovered blockchain, I discovered crypto, and funny enough, the way I discovered was I saw this like really nice picture online, and I was thinking what was that? It was actually an NFT. So I decided to, mint the NFT, and I really enjoyed the entire process. And I thought to myself how I could actually, contribute or add value to the blockchain or Web3 space. And since I am a technical person, I decided to take up coding in blockchain specifically. So I learned how to create smart contracts, and from there on, I became a blockchain developer. And currently, I also lead a tech team at Monkey Ventures. We are a Web3 VC DAO. So for those who are unfamiliar with what the DAO means, it's just basically a community. But beyond a community, what we do is that you can think of us like a Kickstarter, where we sort of pull together funds across different investors, and then we will select projects that we want to invest in. Yeah, so basically that's what Monkey Venture does. And within Monkey Ventures, currently I'm a blockchain. I do blockchain development for them. So I create the platform to allow and facilitate these fund movements from the investors and into the projects. So yes, so very nice to meet all of you guys. All right, so before I start, I want to make sure that all of us are on the same page today. And before I get into ReFi, which stands for Regenerative Finance, I want to explain a little concept of what Web3 is, and then how blockchain is not Web3, but how instead it is a technology that enables this entire Web3 movement. All right, and then thereafter, I will then introduce what regenerative principles and economy is, and how ReFi came about. Okay, and lastly, I'll go through some use cases, and I'll do a couple of announcements on what MetaCamp is doing and how you can actually be more involved in the Web3 and blockchain space after this session. All right. Any questions so far about any doubts, any queries about the session today, or anything about me that you want to know or understand more? Feel free to ask now. All right, seems like there is no one. Okay, no worries. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free and don't be afraid to just jump in and just stop my conversation, and I'm more than happy to answer your questions. All right, so let's go through the evolution of internet. So I'm gonna give the benefit of doubt to those who still are not sure what Web3 is. Okay, so I'm going to explain what Web1 all the way to Web3 is. So during the, back in the days, in the 2000s or even the 1990s, Web1 actually existed. And for Web1, you can understand it as a read-only sort of platform where, so yeah, Jonathan, yes. So for today's session, this is not going to be a technical workshop. It is going to be non-technical, but for the subsequent 2 Fridays later, we are going to organize analytics session, which is going to be technical, and then the last session is going to be a very introductory smart contract session. All right. Yeah, so for Web1, it's read only, the platform or the website creators, they are responsible for putting out the content, and as consumers ourselves, our only job is to access these website links and then read all of their contents, right? So that is Web1, where all the content comes from a particular authority, central authority. Whereas in Web2, which is like today's age, right? There are multiple sort of content creation platforms. So you can think of them as like platforms like Facebook, or YouTube, or Instagram. So how they are Web2 in a way is that, as users or as consumers, right, we are able to write content onto their platform. So we can post our pictures on Instagram, or we can tweet our messages on Twitter, and etc. Right. So we have the power to not only read, but we also have the power to write, create content, put content onto their platform. Now comes the Web3 era, right? Where not only are we able to read and write, right? We can also own the content. So what do we mean by owning the content? So whenever, for example, today, right, where you were to post your Instagram photos or you were to tweet your messages on Twitter, you don't actually own that content that you posted, but in fact, the platform providers are the ones owning the content. So how do we know that they own the content? This content, these things are owned in their server, and they have the power to ban your account, or let's say if you were to infringe certain guidelines or rules on their platforms, and they can any day remove whatever you have written, and that this shows that you don't actually own your content in on the current platforms. So for Web3, the difference is that you own the content, right? So when we say that we own the content, for example, if you were to post a blog article on using a Web3 platform, right? What will happen is that you are actually posting like an information, like data, bytes into the blockchain. And these bytes are actually tagged to your wallet. So what happens when bytes or information are tagged to your wallet? No one else is able to edit this information or delete this information or do anything to the information except read the information other than you, right? So only you can edit or delete that particular information that you have posted on the blockchain. And hence, there's this whole notion of owning things when you're on Web3. And you realize that this is not just like a technological evolution, but it's more, there's a lot of concept of owning, like being your self-sovereign, right? Where you own your things, no one owns it for you. And it's a bit like an ideology. Right, so that's the evolution of internet. And zooming into DeFi, because why we are talking about DeFi today is because there is DeFi is basically like a combination of DeFi and some regenerative principles. So when we talk about DeFi, we want to understand the timeline of DeFi and how it happened, right? So you can see that in 2009, right, Bitcoin was created. So a good something to learn about blockchain, right, is that blockchain has been created years ago before the 2000s, right? And and even the patent for blockchain technology has expired in 2004. And only in the year of 2008 to 2009, the blockchain technology actually becomes more noticed or recognized. And that's because of this particular person called Satoshi Nakamoto, that he's the one who created Bitcoin. And one of the main reasons why he created Bitcoin is because of the 2008 financial collapse, right? Where a couple of banks went bankrupt, and it tells people that, okay, that this central authority or these banks, they are actually not as trustable as we think. And hence, that's why Bitcoin is being created, because we want to own our own assets. Okay, so Bitcoin was created in 2009, and thereafter multiple protocols have been created. And one protocol that we want to really zoom in to, it's Ethereum. So people created Ethereum because people noticed that there are certain limitations to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is basically just a very simple distributed ledger, which contains financial transactions, right? Where, I send one Bitcoin to, for example, Junjie or Jonathan in our chat here, and then they send someone else. These are all very simple transactions, and that's what Bitcoin can do. However, what Bitcoin cannot do is you are not able to publish your programs or publish your functions or your logics onto Bitcoin. Bitcoin is just simply for storing simple transactions, and hence, Ethereum was created, and Ethereum actually created the entire concept of smart contracts. So you can think of smart contracts as, if you're technical over here, right, you can think of it as having your back-end server not hosted on Google Cloud or not hosted on AWS, right? But this back-end server where your back-end server contains different APIs, right? It could be your update, your insert, and etc. These functions in your backend server, they are stored on the blockchain. And you can think of this entire sort of server or group of functions inside a server as smart contracts. All right, so this is the entire notion of smart contracts. And so decentralized finance is basically a peer-to-peer network that displaces financial intermediaries such as banks, brokers, by leveraging blockchain smart contracts. And you notice that the very important thing about decentralized finance is it is peer-to-peer. And because it is peer-to-peer, we are then able to displace all these people like or authorities like banks, etc. All right, so just a very quick recap or very quick introduction to how the blockchain works. So when a transaction is requested, right, the transaction is broadcasted to a peer-to-peer network that consists of computers. So you can think of these networks, right, being computers all over the world, all over the globe, right? And all these computers are sort of in sync with each other, whereby they store the exact same database, right? Where they have the exact same records, and they have the exact same ledger. And we call these distributed ledgers because all the ledgers are distributed. All right, so the next step is the network of nodes uses certain algorithms. So different blockchain protocols use different algorithms to validate the transaction and the user status. And we call these algorithms consensus mechanisms. All right, and then thereafter, we of course verify the transaction. It could be, contracts, it could be records, or even other information like yourself uploading your smart contracts. All right, and then once it is all verified, it's validated, what would happen is that so a blockchain is basically a chain of block, right? And it is multiple blocks being chained up together. So within a block, there are many transactions. So when your individual transaction has been verified, what will happen is that they will combine all the transactions during that particular time frame, and it's combined and becomes a block. And this block is added to the current existing blocks in the blockchain. And yeah, and that's how we know that a transaction has been finalized and has gone through. Okay, so now we are done with the blockchain concept. And this is how actually the DeFi sort of is disrupting the traditional financial system. So you can think of it as today, let's say if you were to use a traditional financial system, right? You were to use maybe you go out for a restaurant or to shop in person, and you were to use a particular credit card. Usually a credit card is tied to a bank, all right? And what you need to do is you usually, swipe your card. And what happens is that the bank actually, deducts the money from your account, and also it uses a particular network, a traditional network. So for example, it could be Visa, it could be MasterCard, and it'll relay this information to that particular network. And then that network provider like MasterCard or Visa would speak to the merchants. So for example, if you're trying to pay money to the restaurant, right? So it'll be speaking to the restaurant's bank, right? And telling the restaurant's bank that, okay, let's give the restaurant $10 because this particular person gave out $10 from his own bank. All right, so that is your traditional financial system, and it comprises of multiple steps. And you notice that it is controlled by multiple central authority, and at any one point of time, right, this central authority have the power to stop the transaction, or do something with your transaction, and you can't do anything about it because you don't really own the things that you are currently owning right now. So for decentralized financial system, it's way simpler. So let's say, for example, if I were to, send a cryptocurrency, it could be USDC or it could be a SGD stablecoin, right? And send it to a restaurant, right? What's going to happen is that I'm just going to let the blockchain know that, okay, I'm going to send maybe 10 USDC over to this particular restaurant. And what will happen is you send this transaction to the blockchain technology over there, and they are going to verify this transaction. Once it's done, it's finalized. When the restaurant checks for the new blockchain, right, the newly updated blockchain, and see that, okay, I actually did pay the restaurant money, then the restaurant would know that, okay, I've already paid. Yeah, so you can see that through these two sort of illustrations, decentralized financial system actually simplifies things a lot more, and also it removes that central intermediary, and it prevents things like banning of your transactions and etc. All right, so when we talk about DeFi, there are different layers of DeFi, right? There's the layer 0, where it's like purely your Ethereum layer, and then there are your layer 1, layer 2s, and then stacked in between the application layer, user aggregation layer. There are multiple platforms or decentralized applications. And now I like to zoom into 3 very popular, or maybe 4 very popular sort of protocols. So the first protocol I'd like to talk about, it's this maker protocol over here. They are actually responsible for creating this particular cryptocurrency called the DAI. And the DAI is actually a stable coin, but they are a decentralized asset-backed stable coin. So one DAI would represent, or would have the value of 1 USD. And this is very, very important because fiat or asset-backed USD stablecoin is a backbone to a lot of liquidity to exchanges, and it allows people to make trades better and have, of course, have better rates in return. And then we'll talk about Compound. Compound is actually a lending protocol. So for those who are not familiar, there you can also lend money on your blockchain, right? And for Compound, what happens is that it will allow people to borrow money with collateral. So for example, if today I have 100 USDC, right? I can perhaps, or I have one Ethereum, and now one Ethereum is worth 1,500 USDC. So what I can do is actually I can go to Compound, I can deposit my Ethereum as a collateral, and I can get back $1,200 worth of USDC while my Ethereum is being locked in like a vault in Compound. So these are lending protocol. It allows people to lock up their own assets and then in return borrow assets. And then thirdly, we have Uniswap. Uniswap is a decentralized exchange. So for example, for centralized exchange, you can think about centralized exchange as your players like Coinbase or Binance or the recently crashed FTX. They are all your centralized exchange where they do enable trading where they are an exchange like your normal exchange, right? They allow you to trade Ethereum for Bitcoin or USDC for Ethereum, but they are still central, right? Where they are owned by an authority. So when we talk about decentralized exchange, right? These exchanges are actually governed and powered by smart contracts. And for Uniswap, right, they run on this thing called the automated market maker. And it is sort of, I would say, it's a pretty good innovation. And it allows people to basically swap cryptocurrencies for one to another. So for example, if I have one Bitcoin today, I can perhaps swap it for 10 Ethereum, something like that. So that's Uniswap, and I won't be going deep into what DEXs and AMMs are. All right, so Brandon, you asked that USDC has 41 billion coins in circulation. Does this mean that there is a reserve of 41 billion USD that are tied to the coin? So that's a good question. So for USDC, right, they are actually a centralized asset-backed stable coin, and they are it is managed by this corporation called Circle. So what Circle does is that they actually do reports. I'm not too sure on what frequency basis, but they do give out reports, and they do report that, okay, so for example, if when we have 40 billion in circulation, right, how many percent are in cash, how many percent are in T-bills and etc., or in bonds. So they are required to report this all this all this percentage of things that they own, to make sure that whatever they own actually adds up to the number of USDC in circulation. Yeah, so yes, from what I know, yes, it can be backed by other assets. So not just purely USD, it can be backed by like your T-bills, like your bonds. Yeah, but I think there are certain rules. They cannot be backed by things that are very volatile. So it can only be backed by like something very equivalent to cash, like your bills or your bonds. Okay, so yeah, there are multiple type of stable coins, and the stable coin topic can actually take up the lesson itself. Yeah, so this is just one of the stable coins that you need to know. And the last protocol that I wanna talk about is Chainlink. Right, so Chainlink is actually an oracle that allows people to tap on off-chain information and on-chain. So for example, right, when we talk about off-chain, it means that information or data that is not on the blockchain. So you think about your weather, or the weather today in Singapore, the bus timings. All these things are not on chain. It's not available on chain. Hence we call it off chain. And on the blockchain, on like for example Ethereum chain, right? The blockchain has no access to the internet. So on blockchain you can't call an API like a www like API, because it has no communication between Ethereum and the internet. So what will happen is that Chainlink is actually a protocol that allows people to set certain parameters so that the chain link nodes can, listen to certain off-chain information. And once the off-chain information is available, they will then post that off-chain information onto the Ethereum network. And hence, this allows people to tap on off-chain data, even when the blockchain doesn't have internet connection. All right, so now that I'm done with DeFi, that's just a very, very high-level overview of DeFi. It actually goes way beyond that, where DeFi has things like your perpetual contracts, your margin trading, your synthetics and things like that, and you can actually go very deep into it. But that's not the main topic that we are going to talk about today. So the next thing I want to talk about is regenerative capitalism and how actually even refi came about. So there was this man called, of course, he's a very wise man. He's called John Fullerton, and I quote him. He says that the universal patterns and principles the cosmos uses to build stable, healthy, and sustainable system throughout the real world can and must be used as a model for economic system design. Right. So it's a bunch of really very chim words all combined together into one sentence. And to understand better what you mean by that, right? There are actually 8 main principles of regenerative economy, and I won't go through all 8 of them, but what principles that I think that are more important and actually resonate with me. Right. So firstly, it is the in-right relationship of that principle, right? Where this principle sort of tell us that whatever we do, right, there is always consequence, and the consequence, and you have to think beyond yourself, your self gain. But what are the damages you can make to the climate and things like that, right? So there's this right relationship where everything is interconnected. And for the second point, empowered participation, it basically means that everyone has a part to play in this entire regenerative economy, and there's no one individual that has no play at this regenerative economy at all. And third point, viewing wealth holistically, it just basically means that there's many type of wealth, and there's not just financial wealth, but there's like a natural wealth, and all this different wealth that we usually forsake. All right, so that's the third point. And the fourth point is innovative, adaptive, and responsive. It basically means that all innovations and creations shouldn't also just be for self-greed, but it should also be for the greater good. And fifth, seeking of balance, right? Seeking of balance between collaborations and competition, and so on and so forth. So there must be a fine balance between everything. And the edge effect abundance basically means that even at the edge networks where things end, like for example a cycle, like a cycle, right? Like as a consumer, right? I buy t-shirts, it ends here, right? I'm wearing a t-shirt. Even at the edge effect, right? I have a part to play. Even like for example, which I'll talk about later on, right? I have a part to play to make sure that whatever I buy, things like that, they are sustainable. And of course, honest place and community and robust circulation. I won't going too deep into that. Yeah, so it's a bit the principles here, they are actually quite abstract and sometimes quite difficult to wrap your head around. Yeah, but just keep these in mind, and you can see that there are certain trends and certain pattern emerging in the blockchain space through these. All right, so for regenerative finance, it just basically means that we make use of the decentralized finance technology that we have today, and we incorporate it with the regenerative principles that I have spoken earlier just now. And then this comes the birth of refi. So one misconception of refi is that we all think that refi purely is just for climate, to protect climate change, and that's just really one small part of what refi actually is. refi contains a lot of different things. And you can see that refi even contains things like the financial system, not just the climate, right? Where you notice that for fast fashion today, it runs on a very extractive and exploitative model where they make use of child labor. You see this very poor little boy actually sewing clothes. Yeah, and how refi can actually solve this is through its technology. And one way that people actually can solve this is, for example, right, whenever you create a clothes or things like that, right, when you buy a clothes, you could actually implement a certain system like for example NFTs or token, right? And this token can actually, since blockchain is transparent, right, you can actually see where are these tokens coming from and where does it flow from. And and as a consumer, you then are able to know that, okay, whatever I'm buying is actually sourced from a sustainable or a quality manufacturer, and it's not of a child's labor product. All right, and this is one way that how refi can actually solve today's problem. Okay, so there are three main sort of categories that refi today tries to address in terms of sustainability challenges. So the first category is climate change, where it, of course, tries to fight the global warming, all these different climate issues. Second is conservation and biodiversity loss. So to make sure that things are conserved, the nature is conserved, and also the animals and things like that, we don't lose all these biodiversity. And lastly, it's equitable and sustainable system. So to make sure that finance is accessible to all, it's equitable, and also it's sustainable. So in a nutshell, refi uses capital and technology to fuel sustainable and systemic growth. All right, so there's a very huge team in DeFi currently that is emerging, and it's, I think, taking the entire refi industry by storm. And it is about carbon offset credits. So today, one carbon offset credit signifies an emission reduction of 1 ton of carbon dioxide. And it is certified by government or credible third parties. And of course, the carbon offset credits is the most tangible, it's the most obvious, and it is the primary tool in refi today. So how does the traditional carbon credit markets work, right? So there are two different type of markets for carbon credit markets. The first market is the mandatory markets, where of course carbon credits are exchanged. And these markets are more for entities who are required to comply certain legal requirements. So this is compulsory for them, and they have to meet these legal requirements. Whereas for the voluntary markets, right, it is used by entities that aren't legally obliged to lower their emissions, but still do so under social, environmental, or governance pressure, or even, like, for example, they are just a very environmental conscious brand, right? And they just want to buy carbon credits to be negative carbon emission. And you can see that there's a trend in voluntary carbon offset. There are many more and more companies coming up and snatching up to buy carbon offset credits. And even for the first half of 2021, the carbon offset market captured about $750 million in terms of sales revenue. You can so you can see that it is on a very sort of exponential growth over here. However, this comes with certain challenges, especially for the voluntary carbon market. So firstly, it lacks transparency, liquidity, and aggregation. So there is a lot of things that are opaque in the current voluntary carbon market system right now. And also in terms of liquidity, there's not much. When we talk about liquidity, there's not much, people selling or buying in terms of volume, and hence there are a lot of over-the-counter sort of trades, messaging, things like that. So it's very traditional in a way. All right, and companies are forced to go through middlemen to find carbon credits that are oftentimes unverified. So there is a problem of double spending, which I'll talk about later on. And some credits, even though some companies they buy it off other third parties through middlemen, these carbon credits are not verified. And that itself is a problem, because companies would think that, okay, they're actually being environmental conscious, but they are in fact doing nothing. Okay, and the third point is there is a barrier to entry for suppliers in terms of upfront costs, because of its turnaround time and return on investment. And lastly, there is a huge problem in terms of connecting and incentivizing reputable suppliers. So there are multiple protocols that set off to fight these challenges, tackle these challenges, and today these 4 different protocols emerge, and they are all sort of in the same theme of things, where they try to make carbon offset credits more accessible and more transparent. All right, you can see that there's Nori, ClimateDAO, Flow Carbon, and Token, and they are all very similar. Nori, Flow Carbon, and ClimateDAO especially, right? They enable voluntary market on the blockchain, whereas for Token, Token is more of a infrastructure kind of protocol, where they sort of give out tokens when someone in exchange has a carbon credit off chain, they give out an on chain token. So that's what Token does, and actually ClimateDAO is powered by Token's infrastructure. All right, so I'll be talking about Nori. So Nori is a voluntary carbon offset marketplace, and this marketplace connects suppliers, validators, and buyers in order to expedite and scale the carbon removal process, right? So in short, it basically facilitates the trading of verified carbon removal offsets. So this is a diagram or an illustration of how they do it. So for example, if you were, or I was a supplier, right? I would then register my carbon removal project with accompanying data. So for example, I'm a farmer, or I start planting soil, and this kind of soil, they are sort of certified to be carbon offset, or they remove carbon from the environment. So with all the necessary certifications and document, I can actually register. And the second step would be third-party tool would then estimate how much carbon removal I will be sort of contributing as a farmer for my project. All right, and then once on the third step, once it's verified, right, we will then go ahead to create a token. So it's called Nori tokens. And how Nori token works is that one Nori token generated, right, would represent 1 ton of removed CO2. So as a supplier or as a farmer myself, when I sort of build the soil, right, I'm able to actually obtain these Nori tokens, and I can put it on a marketplace, and buyers can actually purchase these Nori tokens directly from me. So this essentially lowers the barrier of entry, because many projects struggle due to the high upfront costs and slow result time. For example, it can take farmers more than 10 years to to see the result from the soil, the carbon removal of the soil. And Nori market actually provides an entry point for all sizes of suppliers to the market, and it also ensures all these small little farmers, right, are paid 100% of their efforts after verification. So this in turn incentivizes a new pool of suppliers and increases the liquidity of the voluntary carbon market. And the second problem it solves. All right, thanks Brandon for the question. So what does buying the token actually do? does it help offset a company's carbon emission? So that's correct. So there are actually, especially in the US, there are certain companies, right? They are sort of required to be carbon neutral, or or cannot be emitting too much carbon. And when their companies, right, when they sort of manufacture their products, sometimes they cannot help it, and they have to emit carbon. So in order to reduce their carbon emission to comply to their requirements, what happens is that they can actually buy carbon credits off the market. And very interesting fact is that Tesla, right, they are a car company, and for every car they produce, actually they are sort of like they actually sort of create carbon credit, because their cars sort of doesn't remove carbon, or doesn't emit too much carbon in the environment. And for car producers, they're actually given some sort of credits. And with these excess credits, because their cars don't use it up, they actually sell their carbon credits to other car companies, and they actually also make quite a lot of money through that as well. So yeah, it doesn't exactly help offset a company's carbon emission, like technically speaking, but when you purchase carbon credits of third parties or of other people, by the book or by law, it actually helps you reduce your carbon emission. All right, so I hope that answers. Okay, so for double spending, right? In 2017, over 70% of the total carbon credit volume came from secondary skills. And what it means when it comes from secondary sales is that entities were trading retired carbon credits for profit, and there's a potential that there is false or fake carbon removal credits. So for example, when we talk about double spending, it just means that, for example, right, let's say company A today, they buy maybe 10 tons of carbon credit, right? And what happens is, okay, then for this particular year, right, they will use this carbon credit, and then they will retire it, meaning to say that it will be reflected in their books that, okay, you actually deduct 10 ton of carbon credit. So next year, of course, you cannot use the same sort of carbon credit to deduct already, because you have already used it once. However, in today's system, there is this problem of double spending, where you offset this year, and then next year you sell it to someone else, and someone else can also use it and offset it again. And there's this offset twice or even thrice. And hence we call this the double spending problem. And it's very hard and very difficult to track in today's traditional market. However, with Nori's token, once the token is retired and it's on chain, right? It's very easy to track, it's transparent. And once it's been purchased and it's been retired, it's actually removed. So there's no double spending anymore. All right, so for Nori's, its impact to date is it onboarded 15 different farming projects focused on regenerative agriculture as means of soil carbon sequestration. And this basically means that these 15 farming projects, they farm, or they just basically put soil onto the ground, and this soil are known to remove carbon from the environment. So they have sold more than 86,000 tons of CO2 removals, and they have in total paid over $1.4 million for their carbon removal practices. And of course, they are looking into alternative methods for the subsequent projects that they are going to onboard into their Nori market. One of it is afforestation and reforestation, which basically means planting of trees. Second, it's using biomass to improve soil quality. Third, using bioenergy, which converts biomass to renewable energy. Fourth, it's enhancing minerals. So, accelerating natural process for minerals to absorb CO2. And lastly, it's the direct air capture, where this technology removes CO2 directly from the atmosphere. All right, so this is one sort of trend that's emerging in the refi space today in Web3. The second trend that we see is this solving or disrupting of legacy ESG rating system. So for today, right, legacy rating system, ESG rating system, they are typically opaque. They are inaccessible because they are just so expensive. Only the Fortune 100 companies or companies that are highly profitable and with a lot of revenues are able to afford an ESG rating, right? And it measures risks instead of impact. So it's more of like how likely are these companies going to harm the environment, rather than how likely are these companies going to add or contribute positively to the environment. So there's this company called the Open ESG, which aims to disrupt legacy ESG rating system. And how they do so, it's to create a more transparent, democratic, inclusive, and neutral system. So these are the 4 different components of the Open ESG. So first, they use multiple data streams. So they uses multiple legacy and novel data streams. And secondly, they have, of course, an expert council made out of all really reputable individuals. So people like from the World Economic Forum, people from WWF, and all these different organizations. And thirdly, it's the Open ESG data validator to validate and make sure that all this data that has been being fed into, they are verified. And lastly, there's this Open ESG score where they sort of redefine the current ESG score, and they consider things like more true positive impacts instead of things that are gonna harm the environment. So by doing so, they are able to make greenwashing more difficult and costly. So when we say greenwashing, it's just basically the notion of identifying companies that are more likely to harm the environment, because I think one of their principles or their motto is to change their mentality, and so that people are more focused on the positive, to make sure that which companies are more likely to positively contribute. And of course, the second point is more accurate and transparent ESG scores. And thirdly, it's to fairly reward positive action, and so on and so forth. So you can see that there are all the different sort of points that they try to bring positive change to this legacy ESG rating system. All right, so beyond this climate or ESG rating efforts, right, there are also efforts by blockchain protocols themselves. So for example, the Celo blockchain protocol, they actually funded multiple partnerships with hosted projects focused on afforestation and regenerative agriculture. And as for Solana, right, the Solana Foundation themselves, they are funding a process called refrigerant destruction. And one I think nice point to note is that so the Solana chain itself in 2021, they're actually negative carbon emission. So it means that on paper they are not contributing to any carbon emission. Thirdly, it's a Polygon. Polygon, of course, partnered with ClimateDAO and Nori. So Nori actually runs on the Polygon network, and they basically are supporting all these efforts by ClimateDAO and Nori. And of course, the WEX protocol, it enables virtual commerce through NFTs to negate environmental impacts of shipping. And then there's Near, which focuses more on reforestation with 3 different green projects. And lastly, Algorand, which uses carbon offsets through partnerships with climate trade. So yeah, these are just the few examples on how blockchain protocols themselves are moving towards a more sustainable and regenerative model. So I know I've talked a lot, and there are a lot of concepts I've shared today. And if you'd like to learn more, not just about regenerative finance, right, please do join our Telegram group, where we very frequently share different information about blockchain and Web3. And also we organize networking events and workshops. So you can actually come down to our main training center at the center of Singapore and, hang around and, connect with new people. So yeah, I really encourage you to join our Telegram group. Okay, and other than that, in conjunction with Solana and also our sponsor at OtterSec, we are actually running a hackathon with Solana, and it has a global prize of USD $5 million. So basically how this works is that there is a global hackathon currently running, and it is organized by Solana. So in Singapore itself, right, we are actually also running a Singapore blockchain hackathon where it's more for the local people, right? And this hackathon is running our Singapore version of this hackathon is running hand in hand with the global version, where when you sign up through this link, right, it gives you access to our mentors in Singapore and also to all the workshops and events that we are going to organize during this period for free. And also, of course, our co-working space where you can actually just come down with your team and collaborate and hack your new idea. All right, so if you want to get started on blockchain today, I really encourage you to join this hackathon because it's a really nice avenue for you to start. So the question is, are the prizes for Singapore hackathon different from the global hackathon? So the prizes for the Singapore and global hackathon is different, all right? I mean, it is the same. However, we are still in the talks where there may be, certain categories that are only for Singaporean-based teams. And this is still tentative, it's still not confirmed. But anyways, the extra benefits I've mentioned is that you get this physical in-person events, workshops, and also the space for you to work your things, and also, of course, the mentorships. All right, so I'd like to introduce one very cool sort of platform, and it's called build.superteam.fun, where you can see there are different sort of categories that are currently the verticals in the hackathon. So these categories, you can actually click into them. You can see that these are, potential ideas that you can work on the hackathon. And you can see that even Refi, there is a team for that. All these different ideas you can potentially work on and also make an impact in the Web3 space, and also, of course, the regenerative finance space and the environment as well. So yeah, this is a very good place where you can get inspired, find new ideas. And so this comes to an end of my presentation. So I really hope that you enjoyed the presentation today. And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat, or you could just unmute yourself. Yes, can all these links be shared on the NTUOS Telegram later? Definitely. I will share the presentation slides and also the links to the registration, the links to our Telegram group, and also the link to this ideas platform. All right, so yeah, this comes to an end. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Any questions? All right. All right, just give it 30 seconds. All right, okay. So any advice for beginners? So I think for beginners where you want to get into the blockchain or Web3 space, like what I mentioned, a very good place to start off is hackathon, because firstly, there are a lot of education resource available on hackathon, be it online or in person. So for example, for this current hackathon, we are actually running a 3 weeks long hybrid bootcamp where it's going to be online based, and of course on the weekends you can actually come down in person to our training center, where we'll be talking through how to solve all these assignments and what are the solutions. Yeah, so that is a good way to begin with. And another advice is to understand what you actually feel more passionate about. So in in blockchain or in Web3, there are different verticals. So for example, there are NFTs, there are DeFi, and also there's also refi as well. So identify what you actually like, and then, you know, think of ideas that you can, you know, tackle, or problems that you can tackle with the innovative solution that you can come up with. Yeah, and also know that, you know, your skills, understand yourself better, like whether you are technical or you're not technical, so that you can find the correct person to team up with, or you can, you know, what are the areas that you need to improve on, so you can, you know, what workshops to actually go to. Yeah, so these are all the advice. Yeah, so another question is, I said that blockchains are different from Web3. So are blockchain companies different from companies as well? Are there some middle ground? So I would say that not all blockchain companies are Web3 companies. And that's because when we talk about blockchain, there are private and public blockchains. So when we talk about private blockchains, right, these are blockchains that are used among enterprises, like a more closed network, right, where only, maybe for example, only banks can have access to this blockchain network. So it's private, it's not open to the public. And therefore there's this no notion of this this ownership, where this is what Web3 is all about, ownership. And hence, I would say that not all blockchain companies are Web3 companies. Yeah, and also not all Web3 companies are blockchain companies, because being a Web3 company doesn't mean that you need to, you know, adopt blockchain technology. You can be a Web3 company, but, you know, you do design work for you know, other Web3 protocols. And you can, you know, view yourself as a Web3 company because your work is to, you know, design websites and, or, you know, UI UX for other blockchain protocols, but you don't use blockchain technology yourself. Yeah. Hope that answers. All right, so calling once, twice. All right, so thanks for your time. I really enjoyed teaching and also sharing this presentation today. And I hope you have a good night ahead and also a very great weekend. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks everyone for joining to this workshop. Do remember that we have like 2 more upcoming workshop by Vincent also, and that 2 other workshop is more technical and more hands-on. So if you wants to have a more hands-on experience, so do remember to sign up for the workshop for next week and next week. Yep. So I think that's all for today. Thanks for joining us tonight.
All right.
See
Thank you.
Bye bye.